I'm Christine Moulton, and I'm the secretary of the Marcel Moyse Society. And we are interviewing Julia Bogorad to learn more about her experience with Marcel Moyse. Thank you for doing this interview, Julia.
Thank you. Well, I'm so honored to get to talk to everybody about my interactions with Marcel Moyse, which were foundational for who I am as a musician and really embodied some of the most important moments of my life.
Mm. Could you start by telling us how you met Mr. Moyse, how old you were, where you were in your education, how you came to work with him?
Yes, I was 19 and he was 85.
Mm.
The previous year, a friend of mine from Washington, D.C., where I grew up, had attended the Moyse seminar in Vermont. Her name was Sarah Stern, a very excellent flutist, a few years older than me. She came back and said, "You've got to hear this guy. He is amazing."
Mhm.
So the next year, which was 1974, I enrolled in the Moyse seminar, which he gave for flutists in West Brattleboro, Vermont, in the art studio behind the house of his grandson, Marcel Moyse, who was an artist. So this kind of a shack with big artworks all over the walls. And in the mornings, in the month of June, he would hold class every day for flutists in the European style. So rather than private lessons, what we're used to in this country, there was a class where each student would play, everyone would listen, and then that student would sit down and someone else would come up and play. And in this way, you could hear the same piece taught many different times, and you could hear different people's problems and the different approaches, and you could learn so much over hours and hours and hours of hearing Maître Moyse teaching. In the afternoons, he gave a woodwind seminar where he would coach all the different woodwinds and horn in solos in the tone development book and in great wind repertoire, chamber music.
Mm-hmm.
So I played for Moyse that first summer, the Anderson Opus 15, number 3, G major etude.
Mm-hmm.
I played the slow movement of the Mozart D major flute quartet.
Mm-hmm.
I played for him. I had certain advantages. One was that I spoke French, so I could understand what he was saying because he mix les mots français in with the English. So a lot of people had trouble understanding him. I also could understand better because I had studied at Oberlin Conservatory with a great horn teacher, Robert Fries, who had studied with Moyse. Now, Mr. Fries coached me and my student colleagues on woodwind quintets such as Rica and Cambini that we don't always practice anymore. But in those pieces, he taught me the musical foundation, which was the language that Moyse spoke of. So I had that advantage as well. So I played for Mr. Moyse, and then I sat back down in the audience. Several days later, he looked for me in the audience. "You," he said, "I will bring you to Switzerland to study with me. I will pay for everything but cigarettes. Do you smoke?" And I said, "No, I don't smoke." Uh, uh, so I got to go later in the summer to his other seminar, which he gave in August every summer in a little town called Bosville,
Mm-hmm.
near Zurich. It was in the German-speaking part of Switzerland, but many of the students were French. So I had some German and I got to use my French. And many of the great European flute soloists and orchestral players of Europe at the time would come to pay homage to Monsieur Moyse, including people like Aurel Nicolet, even Julius Baker came, Galway. I got to meet Trevor Y there. All these amazing people. Also the French players, Charles Danino, Raymond Guyot, Raymond Mellon, all these amazing people would come.
Wow.
And sometimes they played. I remember hearing Charles Danino play this beautiful, elegant little solo from the end of Night on Bald Mountain. Ah, so heartrending and elegant. And of course, I got to hear hours and hours of Monsieur Moyse teaching in the class. I would have a private lesson every day from him.
Wow.
And he put my room next to his, my bedroom next to his, so he could listen to me practice.
Wow.
Then I had all my meals sitting next to him, these long European meals, starting with the pipe and then the pernod and then the chartreuse and then the soup. And of course, ending with the pipe at the, he had lots of different pipes of different sizes. And so I heard these amazing stories because, of course, he knew all the great musicians from early 20th century Paris, premiered works by Stravinsky, worked with Debussy, Ravel, amazing stories, also artists, Toulouse-Lautrec.
Mm-hmm.
So we heard all these incredible stories, and it was an education like nothing I could have imagined. When I first heard him in the class, I thought, yes, this is right. This is music for me, and this is what I want to pursue.
Mm. Amazing.
Later, I actually got to work with him at the Marlborough Music Festival, which is a unique festival, which is composed of grand masters like Moyse, Rudolf Serkin. It was founded by Adolf Busch. Later on, Pablo Casals was there, although he died before I was there. And then younger up-and-coming musicians. I was so fortunate when I was there, for example, Yo-Yo Ma was there. He's the same age as me, actually. Was there, Shlomo Mintz, Yefim Bronfman. So that was an incredible education. And Moyse would run a woodwind class of wind chamber music for the wind players at Marlborough.
Mm. And did you go regularly or certain years? Was this, how often did you go to Marlborough or the seminars?
I was really fortunate I participated in the Marlborough Music Festival for 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
starting in 1975, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which was an amazing experience. Of course, it's still going on.
Right.
With wonderful young musicians there, a whole new generation.
And so did you continue to work with Moyse over the years?
I did. I kept going back in the summers. I got my job with the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra in 1977, so I couldn't go as often.
Right.
Before that, I was in graduate school at Yale studying with the great Thomas Neifinger. So then that wasn't so far to Vermont, so I would drive up during the winter as well to study with him. And Neifinger, interestingly, was very captivated by Moyse from my telling him about him.
Yeah.
So in one memorable occasion, Neifinger actually went up and played for Moyse, two genuine geniuses meeting each other for the first time. And of course, Moyse recognized Neifinger's genius, and they both had a propensity for punning. So Moyse called Neifinger Nine Finger.
That's great. Mm. Gosh, this is a hard question, but were there any favorite aspects of his courses? And you've already mentioned a lot, the people that were attracted to this center of genius. Were there other aspects you can think of that were particularly important or moving to you?
Well, I would say the importance of the legacy of his teaching.
Hmm.
I would mention three things in particular.
Hmm.
One, which is most recognized, is his uncanny ability to light up the room through mime and gesture and metaphor. He could just turn the room pink. He could inspire the student on the spot
Hmm.
to play with an emotion and an expression that the student didn't even know he or she had in her.
Yeah.
So this is, of course, most memorable. The second important aspect of his teaching was his bringing this great tradition. Moyse was born in 1889. So for those of us still alive today, he was bringing a tradition of 2 centuries ago. In particular, the great operatic style, 19th century style, which not so many people are familiar with today. But in fact, if you look at the great canon of composers that we build our repertoire on from Mozart on, almost every composer had a foundation in opera and in vocal tradition.
Hmm.
So this is something very important that Moyse had to bring that we can learn from. Then related to that is the third area that I think was most important that people don't talk about as much, which is that Moyse taught about the language of music.
Hmm.
The fact that tonal music, we're talking obviously about Western tonal music, um, has a certain syntax, a certain language. So you have an upbeat and a downbeat. It's like an article and a noun. And you have passing notes, which are like prepositions, etc. And then you have a skeleton in the music, which is fleshed out with passing tones and ornaments and dissonance. And all of this Moyse talked about in a way that I had never heard before until some years later. I heard about it when I was working with people in the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, such as Christopher Hogwood, who was our first original performance practice conductor, which was new at the time, who talked about structure versus ornamentation. Now, you wouldn't think of Baroque, authentic performance practice as being related to Moyse, but it's really all the same tradition. I mean, really from Baroque through classical, through Romantic, through 20th century is not that many generations. And it's really people who knew people who knew people, Beethoven played for Mozart and, etc. It's all one tradition of tonal music and how to interpret it. Starting even with something like a Handel sonata. I love to coach Baroque ornamentation with my students so that they look at a Handel sonata, for example, and see the simple slow movement of half notes. What do you do with these half notes? Well, you add appoggiaturas and passing tones and different kinds of ornaments and dissonance. Then when you look at later music, Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, even through Schoenberg, even 21st century music, it's all the same language, but later composers were micromanagers. So they wrote their own ornaments. So if you can see, separating the wheat from the chaff, as it were, you can see the skeleton and then see how the composers added their own ornaments. You know how to interpret the music. It's really the language of music. I was thinking of that even just a couple days ago. I was practicing a piece by our great contemporary composer, Valerie Coleman. I'm working on her Danza della Mariposa. And the opening, it's totally drawn from the tradition of tonal music. ba ba bee da da dum, ba 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 dee da yum. It's all one tradition. She brings in lots of other cultures and expressions, but you can see that there's a basis in tonal music, and of course she has the strong flute playing tradition, all of which goes back to Moyse, and even before that to Tafanel and Altez and Dorus and all these great flutists and musicians.
I love how you're linking her to who's getting such good and deserved attention
Yeah,
to
wonderful composer. I love her music.
mm, and linking that to Moyse and beyond. The musical books, exercises that he left us, what are some that are your favorites, some that you use in your teaching, and why, though I think you've answered some of that already because of this, the 3 points that you made would come out in his exercises, like the 24 and the um, tone development.
Well, with all of my students, I like to start with one element of his book, De la Sonorité, which is just the very basic exercise that probably almost everyone is familiar with. The first note, 1 beat, and 3 beats on the second note, and matching up the tone quality up and down the range of the flute. And I'm not sure everybody knows what to do with this. First of all, just talking about sonorité. What is sonority? The cognate in English, of course, is sonorous. So it's a sound that has life, that's ringing. In Moïse's book, I was just looking at Comment j'ai pu ma forme, how I stayed in shape. He talks about finding the life in the sound, and he says it's not forcing the air, but it's warming up your lips. He talks about la souplesse, the suppleness of your lips to gradually come in. He'd say, come in, open the tone. And it's this ringing tone. Another expression I think of is from the great oboe teacher, Tabuteau, Marcel Tabuteau, who was a contemporary of Moïse, who talked about the amplification of the dolce tone. Yes. So you find the warmth and the color. Moïse constantly talked about color, the light shining through the leaves, the cool blue of the water. And then you gradually develop your sound. He said, don't start in the high register, never start your day in the high register, but gradually come in, and then the high register will develop. So I like to work with all of my new students, especially on finding the beauty in the sound with the sonority exercises. And then of course, Anderson Opus 15, especially, all the Anderson, but Opus 15 is the one that I heard Moyse talk about the most and teach the most. Of course, it's great for the technique, but even more than that, it's great for learning how to build music, because hidden amongst all those notes are a musical line, skeleton. Opus 15 number 3 especially is an example where there's a beautiful melody. And not only do you find the melodic notes and give them a special color and allow them to ring, but then you connect those notes up to make a melodic shape. So that the story goes that Anderson came to Tafanel's flute class at the Paris Conservatory, and Tafanel performed for Anderson that Opus 15 number 3, starting with the melody and then adding all the notes. And as it grows and then dies down, Anderson apparently said, I never knew I wrote such beautiful music. So a lot of people think, oh, you just play these really fast with the metronome markings, and Moyse would get furious if people played things just really fast in any old way without finding the music in them. The third book of his that I love to teach from, which I use with all of my students from junior high through doctoral, is the Tone Development Through Interpretation, which of course is not music that Moyse wrote, but rather that he wrote down, he transcribed these mostly opera arias, they're mostly vocal, not all of them. When he was in the Opéra Comique, he heard many great singers, and he felt that the singers had a stronger tradition of expression and emotion and color than the wind players. So he wrote down these melodies, first using them for himself to try to develop these aspects. And then later in his teaching, he would use them for all the winds. I heard him coach French horn and bassoon and clarinet to develop the musical expression. So for him, it was always starting with a musical intent. The same with the vibrato, that it was the life in the sound. It was not imposed on the sound. So these melodies, you can use them in so many different ways. Of course, in studying phrasing on the flute, it's hard just technically to make a phrase, because if you want to start softly and get louder and then end softer, as many phrases do, you have to figure out a way to do that, starting not too flat and then not going sharp when you enlarge the sound, and then not going too flat at the end. So they're good for technical things, but primarily they're great for discovering what it means to have a phrase. I think a lot of students haven't really thought about or explored the idea of what is a phrase, like a musical sentence. In French, une phrase is a sentence, any kind of sentence. So I think these melodies are so great because you can look at them and decide what is the musical gesture. It's not that there's one right way and one wrong way, but there are certain things that you know that are baked into the music, right? The note is either consonant or dissonant. That's not subjective. It either is or it isn't. It's an ornament or it's skeleton. All of these things you have to know first. Moyse would compare it to building a house. So you study the plan for the house, the design, and you can see there are structural beams, and then you add the archways and the ornaments. You have to know that in order to understand how the house is built. This is in the music, so you have to learn that in order to interpret the music. Then when you understand the language and the structure, obviously you can add in your own nuance. And that's what you can study in these phrases. Now, I think that the melodies in the tone development book are especially great because they're written by these great operatic geniuses, as we spoke of before. When you study a melody by Verdi, for example, it's not formulaic. It's always unexpected. You know, he'll arise to a moment and then something else happens that you never would have thought of. Or Mozart, you could never predict a Mozart melody. It sounds appropriate, it sounds like it makes sense once you know it, but you never could have predicted it. So in studying these melodies, the students can learn, well, how do I make this make sense? How do I find the shape and the gesture and the expression? Of course, it's also stylistic. Now, people have made the point that you can use your own melodies to study phrasing and write a new version of the tone development book, which I think is valid. But I think there are two misgivings I have with that. First, a lot of the melodies that you might find might not be as worthy of study. You know, they may not be as good. But also, I think it is important to find this operatic style. The fermatas, where the singer will display the voice, right? And then this kind of falling away, like a note goes up and it's suspended in midair, and then gradually you have gravity pulling it back down. It's kind of an operatic gesture. A lot of these things you can actually use in orchestral playing, for instance, once you understand them in operatic language. So I find it useful for every student at every level to look at these great melodies.
And we have all these wonderful singers available now to us on YouTube, for example, that we can be inspired by and model and learn from.
Exactly, yeah.
It sounds like Moyse was asking the people who played for him not only to be artists, but thoughtful, whole human beings, to play from a place of creativity, thoughtfulness, generosity, feeling.
Exactly. I love that word generosity.
Mm-hmm.
He would say généreux. The sound is généreux. That means if you're giving it to the audience. You must kiss your audience, he would say.
Mm.
And he talked about expressing love.
Mm. Yeah, it's hard to play strictly technically if you're thinking that there's some quote of his that I long ago learned that the beauty of the sound comes from the generosity of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's some quote like that.
Exactly.
It would be hard to be caught up in just technique if you're thinking, I need to be expressing love from my heart while I'm playing.
That's right. And he saw the technique as secondary.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I mean, he had amazing technique, although he was always working on it. And, he had these exercises with all different possible combinations of notes, which people called the wallpaper book. So he said he did that because he needed to work on his technique. So he had amazing technique, but he always said the technique was in service to the music, and the music comes from within. It's kind of like the acting school, where if certain school of acting, where if you have the interior state, then the exterior details will emanate from that, rather than trying to impose it on top. So it's genuine. I feel as though Moyse's musicality was like that. And it wasn't just pretty. People talk about his playing. It wasn't just pretty playing. There was a certain devilishness to the sound. A great violinist.
You've mentioned the feeling and the expression that he asked people to, that he drew out of people, or he inspired people to use when they played. Are there any non-musical things that you learned from Mr. Moyse? I mean, certainly history. We learned musical history firsthand from him. The art of expression, how to be an artist.
Indeed, he did talk about various composers, how Ravel dressed really well. He was kind of a dandy and loved partying and joie de vivre. And Debussy, by contrast, was very dour and very hard to please. He said that he had something like 13 or more rehearsals of the Debussy trio for flute, viola, and harp with Debussy, and he said they never got it right. Debussy was never happy. And he went to a rehearsal of La Mer, first rehearsal with Debussy, and the horns did something that Debussy didn't like, and he went. And Debussy's friend, I'm not sure if it was Satie or Cocteau, I should check on that. His friend was there hearing La Mer for the first time. And Debussy said, well, what do you think? And they had just played the movement De l'aube à midi sur la mer, from dawn to noon on the sea. And was Cocteau or Satie said, oh, it was so great. There was one moment around 10:15 a.m. So anyway, so he had many amazing stories. Of course, the other thing you could learn was how to live. I was so lucky to get to spend time with him in Switzerland. One day we went with Monsieur Roche, who was the coordinator for the seminar in Beauceville, and we drove in the Alps. I know Moyse got a lot of his inspiration, like crescendo, from seeing something like the Alps. He loved gathering for dinner. He was so generous. He would have his students come and eat with him, and he would tell jokes. He had a lot of cow jokes, and he did jokes with matches from a matchbook. It was very funny. So he taught me to eat snails and just enjoy dinner and camaraderie.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
He was not always easy, I should mention.
Yeah, I've heard this.
I mean, he could be hard on students. You love this piece? Then why you kill? Who is your teacher? She steal your money. You have a tongue? Let me see your tongue. Life, my God. Of course, this is when, his students were 20 years old and he was 85, but he said, life. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. If you could play one thing for him tomorrow, what would it be?
I would play anything from the tone development book, because his presence was always more and more vivid and more amazing than my memory of it could even be. So if I could experience that again, I would love to do that.
I have a personal question, because I believe that those who speak French have their tongue in a specific position, and what I think Americans at least describe as French articulation can be misunderstood as like a flat tongue through the lips. And speaking French, your tongue is in an U position, more in that shape. And so the French articulation, in my understanding, is not a flat tongue through the lips, but more of a, you can see the tongue, but it's shaped more like that. Is that something that you would like to comment on, or not want to go there?
Well,
because you can see his tongue when he articulates.
Yeah, you can. I think it's not just the tongue, but I think it's the sound. Because as you say, there's this vowel sound in French. It's very far forward. Je bus du jus dans la rue. This useful sentence, which means I drank juice in the street. So this U, very far forward. In English, we talk back here, but in French, on parle comme ça. It's much more forward. So I think this lips forward is a very useful position for the flute. So, of course, the French have this conceit that their language is the best for playing the flute. Now, Moyse didn't often talk about such mechanics as the tongue, but he did teach me the so-called French tonguing, which was to put your tongue between your lips and then withdraw it, which gives a very precise tongue. I talked to Jean-Pierre Rampal about that, and he said he always used that. He said he used it even in double tonguing. I'm not sure everybody did. Some people use it only for the certain staccato where you want that special effect. But for Moïse, he said it's like, he said, jeter des clous d'or sur le ciel, send golden nails into the heavens.
And the tongue is going to be in a different position as a French speaker than
I
as
think
an
so.
American
I mean, a
speaker.
lot of Americans tongue farther back on the roof of their mouth.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
And I find if I tongue too far back, it's slower.
Yeah.
Even my teacher Neifinger, who was not French, but he made the point that if you have kind of a triangle here with the roof of your mouth,
Yes.
that if you're tonguing at the apex of the triangle, it's faster than if you're tonguing back here. Maybe for certain things like the low register, I might tongue farther back.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, people have great tonguing that do all different kinds of things. I should say that.
Agreed.
There's so many different ways to play the flute. And actually, what I love most about the flute is that you can find so many different sounds and so many different colors, and everybody sounds different.
Yeah. Well said.
Really, each one person can sound different. If you can sound in many different ways and find many different colors yourself, that's even more interesting. So that it's like painting with watercolor.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's being an artist.
Mhm.
Any final thoughts on this interview that you'd like to share?
Well, finally, I'd like to say that Moise's memory may be fading. I mean, there are a few people around that actually experienced him. And some people have accused the Moise study of being a cult of personality.
Hmm.
And I don't find that to be the case. It doesn't really so much matter who Moise was. I mean, it's certainly great to know, but what matters is the legacy, the musical legacy of people like Moise and other great musicians. I heard David Oistrakh playing the Tchaikovsky concerto the other day. You know, it just kills you. The heartfelt type of playing. So it's the musical legacy that is most important. I might mention, for those of you who want to get more familiarity with a lot of this, my favorite writing about Moise is this book, Marcel Moyse, An Extraordinary Man, by Trevor Y. And it
I
has
have mine
quotes.
right over here.
It's such a great book, and it has first source quotes from many people who knew him, such as Peter Serkin,
Yeah.
Bernard Goldberg, neither of whom are with us anymore. A lot of first source material, and of course, Trevor Y knew Moise intimately. So it's really a great source to get steeped, not only in who he was and his life, but also his teaching and his musical ideals.
That's a great point. And having never met Moyse, I can say that I wasn't attracted to the cult of personality. I was attracted to the musical insight
Mhm.
and expression and wisdom that I learned through studying his music, his exercises, like the 24. Yeah. So that comes through loud and clear.
Well, I'm so glad you're doing this kind of work to keep that legacy going. Thank you so much.
Yeah. It's such a pleasure to talk with you and to hear your experience and inspiration that you got from Moyse.
Well, thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah, wonderful.